All right, Jesse, great to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, nice to meet you too, Eric. Hello.
Yeah, awesome. So we're gonna talk about one of my favorite topics today, which is how to make people happier at work. But before we get there, I just want to get to know you a little bit more. I was looking at your profile and saw that you started your career in game design, which is another area that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm interested to hear how you got into that.
Right. Yeah, I heard you did some stuff with the PlayStation back in the day. I think I probably personally wasted a lot of time as a younger person because of your work. So thank you for giving me an excuse to skip class and not turn in my papers on time and irritate my parents.
Yeah, well, I love the gaming industry. That was my passion as well. And after a couple years experiencing the toxicity of that industry, I got out. And so, it's apropos of what we're talking about here today.
Right. Sometimes dreams turn into nightmares in that industry for sure. Um, I had a short stint there, so I was lucky to never have to experience the really brutal crunch of like a AAA project coming down to the wire. But I did end up getting into game design in sort of an interesting way. I went to school with a degree in journalism, and I also got a degree in history, both of which involve a lot of writing. Like you just write like crazy. And there was a indie video game studio right by our university that a friend of mine was working at. So when I graduated with no real marketable skills, like I didn't want to be a weather reporter in Idaho Falls or something like that. And like I needed a job. And they were hiring writers. They needed people to write character bios and come up with storylines and things like that. And so I showed them some of my journalism writing samples, and they must have been really desperate because they asked me to come and write for them. Um, but it was about, I don't know, maybe not even a year that I was there. But it was such a great introduction into the technology world that I'd only really ever kind of freelanced. Just say found it intrinsically interesting. First time I'd really sat with professionals, like professional coders and producers and great media people and content people, and it's like, wow, this is really special. But it definitely was, understood that that was a world where crunch was a real thing, and there were some downsides to gaming. So I was really fortunate to get an opportunity to move over to business software, where it can still be busy, it can be hard, but the world of software as a service, enterprise SaaS is it's a little bit more lifestyle friendly than the gaming industry for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm interested, so you obviously have this background in storytelling. Do you draw from that in your current work?
It's been such an advantage to be a storyteller naturally. My family's kind of that way. On my mom's side, she has 8 siblings, and when they get together for family reunion, it's a gas. Like every one of them, they just compete to see who can tell the most outrageous story, and they talk over each other. Every moment of their lives has like an introduction, rising action, a climax, falling action, and a denouement. Like every single one of them speaks in 3 act plays. And so coming to the business world, it was really a delightful surprise that you can tell stories about what you do even in business. Like this is what our software is, what it represents, how it changes the experience of your people at work, and or it turns you into a superhero in this really cool way because it empowers you in your career to do something that you couldn't before. So yeah, I use that all the time as a product person now.
Oh, that's incredible. That's great. I'm an executive coach, but I worked with product teams for many years, and it's of my opinion that storytelling is the product team's primary responsibility is to provide context and meaning to the work that the teams are doing. And so, I do a lot of storytelling kind of workshops with product managers to help them. Again, what is the use case here, right? How do we take this? This kind of sort of dry specification and connect it to a real human being that's really struggling in the real world.
Yeah.
So that when the engineers are working on something, they actually care. you know, they care about what they're doing and they care about who they're delivering it to and so on. Uh, so that's a superpower for sure.
There's a quote out there, and I definitely not invented by me, but I just love it. I've adopted it, and that people don't buy software; they buy a better version of themselves. And so each experience with our product it's got to be inherently personal because they wouldn't be using it if they weren't striving to improve something about themselves and what they do and what their life is like. So I totally agree. Mapping from the human experience down to ones and zeros is really the art of of technology product management.
Yeah. And then what about gamification? Has that come into your work at all? Do you look at those game design concepts and try to apply it to customer experience?
I really do in my current role. So, as the head of product at Motivosity, we're a company that's all about helping people be happier at work and engaging people at work in meaningful ways. And so the social fabric of work is something that like it's super disrupted right now because of the pandemic, and people are like redefining what it means to have coworkers and colleagues and how you interact with each other. And gamification, I think, is just nothing more than using some of those psychological tools to help drive certain behaviors. And I feel good about what we do around gamification because of the motive of the product. Like you can gamify products where the outcome is more attention to sell more ads, or even worse, like the outcome is to get people to part with their hard-earned cash for something that's speculative. Or and like I'm not going to name names of which products are like making it really easy for retail investors to like part with their cash, and as an example, right, of almost gamifying something that's actually really serious. um, but for us, what we're trying to gamify is getting people to connect with their coworkers in positive ways and build relationships that are meaningful with the people around them. And we don't have a business model based on selling ads or some other like subtext to it, right? Our whole model is companies are buying our product to help their coworkers be happier about being at work every day and being together. And so we get to have like sit on our high horse a little. Like we have the moral high ground for gamification, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And get and use it to get people to feel good about what they do. Mhm. Yeah, like how about getting addicted to the idea of having several great friends at work that you can rely on and that support you and that make your day better? Like that feels like a pretty darn good reason if there was ever to be one. Yeah, the idea to build a company like this is like if we were I have to just backtrack a little. And you can like edit or whatever. Um, Choosing to build employee engagement software is it's not the best way to build a company that you're just going to make a lot of money at. I'll just say that. Like the HR buyers are not well capitalized. It's like the value prop is kind of indirect because yes, there's obviously ROI on happiness at work, but it's not something that you put in a spreadsheet. It doesn't show up on your P&L. Like it's this indirect thing. Like we're going to help you build your culture, right? So no one in their right mind would decide to build a company like this with any goal other than like a pure one around what's the good that we're trying to do here. And the founder of our company, he founded another tech company that is pretty successful. It was sold to Adobe in 2020 called Workfront. And I was there for many years as well, from the very early days, and as it matured into a late stage SaaS enterprise SaaS company. And I got to see firsthand how culture degrades over time. It's like a garden that has to be tended with so much care and effort. And the natural entropy that creeps into startups as they get bigger and bigger in terms of the cultural entropy, is very real, and it has an impact day to day on the people that are there. And so I witnessed firsthand people that I cared about go from loving their job and loving the people that they were with to feeling like they weren't really bought into the mission anymore. They weren't really satisfied in what they were doing, and they still did it because the money was good. Equity positions were awesome. Like nobody wanted to leave their unvested shares behind, but they were only doing it for those reasons. So when Workfront was at least was financially successful, there was an opportunity to do it again. Like, so let's build another tech company, and we really he was very motivated by cracking the code on this. How do we keep the culture strong as a company grows? And so was I. And so when the opportunity came around for me to start working with him again, after my stint at Workfront, I went to a different tech company, and then we got back together to work on this one. So our motivation for building this company is really based around this idea that we experienced it firsthand. We experienced the loss of a good company culture. Workfront's still a fine place to work. I'm sure their Glassdoor rating is great, but it was a spectacular place to work early on. And we want to bring that feeling to as many companies as we possibly can, and thereby have that positive impact on as many workers as we possibly can, through the efforts that we're putting into technology now. So that's kind of long-winded, but that's why Motivosity exists, and what we're all about.
That's it's a very common challenge as companies scale up, and clients will even come to me and ask, how do we get that startup magic again? And it really is about culture. What is it about the startups that were so great? People were connected. They shared a common goal. They were passionate about what they were doing. They were connected to the customers and the cause of the company. And then as the companies grow, it creates distance between people and the customers, teams and each other. You create these silos and so on, these different tribes, and they lose it, right? And so that's great that you guys are able to bring that to companies at scale. So specifically, what problems are you solving for companies?
Well, there are a few different, and you mentioned some of them too. So a few different demotivators that creep in naturally. And so our product design is really focused on addressing each of those. One of the big ones is feeling appreciated at work and feeling recognized. And it's helpful that there's already an industry out there called the employee recognition industry, but it's a little bit of an old school industry. It's really still focused on things like crystal trophies and employee parking spaces and stuff like that. Like, I got recognized, I got a watch. Yeah, me too. I'm like, I love them. I've got several in a box in my basement. They're great. And then there's you get the watch when you hit your 5-year mark, and that's exciting too. I've got a watch. It's sitting in my drawer, with the dead battery. So the employee recognition industry was trying to solve this problem a little bit, like help people feel appreciated at work, but they were doing it in a way that doesn't really work. We offer a solution there where the recognition is much more peer-to-peer. It's much more social. It's much more egalitarian, and it works a lot better that way. People feel more appreciated and recognized when it's consistent and when it's coming from their peers as well as their manager. So we have products for that. Another source of demotivation at work, and it's a natural one, is the relationship with your boss. Like, if you don't have a great boss, it's actually the number one reason people leave companies, is they have a bad relationship with their boss. And so a lot of times that comes from the boss not being really skilled themselves. Maybe they were a great individual contributor, so they got kicked upstairs and they don't know how to be a great support. So we have tools for managers to help turn them into leaders and make them much more effective at the relationship side of working with their employees. And then, lastly, as companies grow, we experience this at Workfront. It gets harder and harder for the founding team and the executives to communicate the vision and then to hear it reflected back, to stay aligned with their employees and to maintain that feeling of transparency and openness where everybody just talk to everybody. And so we have a tool that uses surveys and employee net promoter score and analytics, and really tries to create that transparency, maintain it as companies get bigger and bigger. And some of our customers buy all of our tools because they want to improve in all those different areas. And some of them have a goal around their manager development, or they have a goal around recognition, or a goal around transparency. And so they'll buy one of the Motivosity products. But that's why we offer them, in all these different areas, is because each one plays an important role in helping a company culture thrive.
Yeah, there's a great quote that I heard from sort of an HR executive where they say, people quit because of their bosses and they stay because of their teams. And this came from a conversation we're having around remote work and how when, we've been going remote anyway, but when COVID happened and everyone was forced to go remote, we lost that connection with our teams. And so they believe that that was the reason for all of the attrition that's been happening over the last couple of years. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's it makes sense to me. Totally true. I think there are a lot of factors in the Great Resignation. Like it's like a macro trend, and it's so many different things playing into it. But the lack of connection at work, it's like an anchor in the storm. When times are good, then you're making good money. You've got every other things are going well. Like work can be kind of okay, right? It can be a 7 out of 10. You're happy when you get your paycheck and you hit the lake on the weekends and you're satisfied. But when life's not going well, when it feels like the world is on fire, and frankly, in this decade, for whatever reason, it's like that's constant. The world's on fire all the time. It's those relationships that are your refuge in the storm. So whether those are personal or professional, having those people that you look forward to spending time with every day, and that that they're grateful that you're there, like they express that to you and you feel valued, I think it's essential. It's essential to keep people at work. And business leaders are understanding that more and more. I think they get it. Whether they have all made a decision to do something about it that's meaningful, I think is a more open question. Most of the companies that we talk to know it's a problem, and most of them are not really sure what to do about it yet. Mm-hmm. Well, the good news is there's lots of different things to try. um, some are more effective than others. I don't know about Zoom cocktail hours. I'm kind of glad those are gone. That was really weird there at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, I think there are things that we knew intrinsically were important when we had our in-person office culture that we have to find a way to replicate. Want to like walk in the halls as a leader. You probably, as an executive coach, I'm sure you encourage your clients to like get out there, go spend time with the team, go talk to them at their desks and understand what's going on in their world. And so you've got to have a way to replicate that virtually.
Funny anecdote. I had a client who that is exactly what I did. He was always locked in his room, very product focused founder, and I coached him to do exactly that. Get out there, walk around, talk to your team. And everyone was scared shitless when he finally did it because they'd never seen him before. And so we had to really coax people into it. Like, hey, I'm just trying to get out of my office a little bit, get to know people a little more. So anyway.
That's really good advice. And that him being a little vulnerable probably wouldn't hurt either. If it were me, I'd be like, hey, you know what? My executive coach, he told me I really need to do better at this. And I'm trying. I'm really trying to do better. How are you? you know, it's Eric's fault. That I have to talk to you right now. Right. But truthfully, in a virtual environment, you have to do the same thing. So, whether you've got a collaboration tool like Slack or something like that, where you can have some open channels and you very conscientiously participate on those, even the dorky ones that are full of GIFs, like that's a water cooler. That's a virtual water cooler right there. And you got to be there and participating in the nonsense, just like you were, hopefully, when you were physically in the office. Another thing you can do and that I think is really critical is make sure that those one-on-ones, as critical as they were when you were in person, they are even more critical in a remote environment. Like it's not always fun to have to get on another Zoom call and spend an hour, really engaging with somebody, but it's essential in a remote environment to do that. So we have a one-on-one tool that we build and sell because it's such an important part of maintaining a good relationship when other ways that you might do it kind of they fall away.
So this was the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about. I'm of the belief that the number one biggest waste of time in an executive's calendar is one-on-ones. Not because we shouldn't do it, but because we're so bad at it that they're completely useless as they are. And so I'd really like to get your thoughts. What makes a great one-on-one?
I'm glad that you brought that up too. And because they can be seen as a waste of time, especially if the relationship is already there and it becomes sort of an exercise in just chat about whatever the news of the day.
Or a status update, or an airing of grievances, or a nagging session?
Right, right. And what we found that uh, the one big hurdle is going from no interaction to having some. So that's like the first gate. And there are a lot of for maybe it's less common with executives because of they know that they need to do one-on-ones, but then like new managers especially, like, wow, this is weird. Okay, so I'm like sitting down and we're just staring at each other across the table. And I will say yes, like at the start, you got to get it on the calendar and you got to go do it, and it's going to feel super weird. So, but do it. Just do the like exercise, right? I look super weird lifting those 10 pounders in the gym where everybody else around me is yoked, but I gotta show up and do it. Um, and then but once you've gotten there, the very next question is, okay, well, what should we talk about? And that's where our tool really comes in, right? You need to have an agenda, you need to have recurring items that you touch base on. I've got a list of 5 or 6 questions that and that we will share, our customer success team will share with companies when they're looking for advice around that. What was your biggest win from the last week? How are you feeling? What are blockers that you've run into? What's something that came up this week that was a huge surprise to you, and why was it a surprise? Like those prompting questions that can open up deeper conversations. Because you're right, status update, I can check the Kanban board and see what tasks were completed, but I want to know what's going on with you and with work right now, and then what can I do to add value to your work between now and the next time we meet. So we've got, we don't do like a formal goal setting thing. We have what we call priorities, and they're just tell me what are the most important things for you between now and the next time we meet, so we can leave really aligned on what's most important. Just things like that, when done well, are just transformative. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we're putting our money where our mouth is, building products to support that approach.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm really glad you do that, because a lot of SaaS companies in general, they provide you the tools or the platform, but they don't give you the content or the best practices to make it really meaningful. So having an agenda tool is great, but being able to feed it in with those powerful questions, well, makes it a lot more effective.
And we found that when managers start to do this consistently, it's one of the number one predictors of employee retention. Like that good, if they've got a good relationship and they're consistently meeting, then they tend to not turn over. They're like way more likely to stay. And the way I know that is because we do run the survey and we ask the question, like, would you leave for 10% more money? And we can measure intent to stay and see it go up when people have consistent one-on-ones with their boss.
Well, that's interesting. So you mine all of your own data, and you're able to tweak it and figure out what actually makes a meaningful difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's maybe a little counterintuitive, but it's also common sense that it's the simple things. It's just consistently meeting. stuff like that. Like just be there. Just it's like we say to the you know God, the when dad moves out, right? Like what do, dad? You just got to be present. Just be there for your kids. It's like the number, just be there. You don't have to take them to Disneyland every weekend. You just got to show up. And it's the same way with relationships at work. You just show up, you be present for your people, and it makes such a difference.
So when the pandemic happened, we all went remote. I did a lot of research or studied a lot of research on this effect on team cohesion. And one of the studies that I found analyzed how much time people were spending each day in building relationships at the workplace. So, meeting at the water cooler, the coffee breaks, going out to lunch together, having those hallway conversations, doing happy hours with the team, what have you. And on average, it was about 2 hours a day that people were investing in building relationships, and that's just gone now. That was just cut off the top. And so what I've been coaching is you have to reinvest that time. You were paying for it, right? You were paying company money on building those relationships. You got that money back. Oh, hey, productivity went up. Everybody's at their desk all the time typing away, but you need to reinvest that time. And so, those virtual happy hours are great, but they need to be on company time. Don't ask somebody to spend another hour on another Zoom call at 6 o'clock at night with a drink in their hand, right? Things like game time, trivia time, things like that after a morning stand-up, and then even bringing people together face to face multiple times a year, because guess what? You're also saving all that money on commercial real estate. So, so I guess what do you see in terms of the kinds of investments that the people are making that are really making a difference?
Yeah, we definitely are seeing people experimenting with more and more and of those kinds of ideas, and they're figuring it out a little bit at a time. It's something that we do. We've got a whole bunch of engineers in Europe, and we fly them here to the States for to spend time with us as a big group, and we also provide budget for them to have lunches and have breakfasts and go do things together in the cities that they live. We have one client right now who's we're working with on a really interesting product concept where our mobile app allows their employees to opt in to sharing their location, and then uh, create circles of folks that are geographically in the same area. So as they travel around, they're all over the United States. They can connect and they can find, they can go do their social event if they want, or even just reach out to people that are in town. If they're flying into Chicago and there's 20 of them, let's go do something fun. So those are some of the things that people are doing right now. And one like it's like a side effect of this phenomenon that you're talking about is those social groups they can either reinforce your company culture and your vision and make things better, or they can actually make it really hard. Like they can make change management really hard. When morale is down, like those places become vortexes, and so of negativity even. And so one good thing about being able to do this more intentionally, like we are going to create social experiences together intentionally, is you can have a little more influence on how you frame them up. Like we can frame them into positive experiences in a more intentional way rather than just sort of be hopeful about it. And so I see companies like that's part of why they'll use Motivosity, is because there's such an attention given to recognition and appreciation. It tends to be like a very positive and happy place. And so you can cultivate positive, you want more positive social experiences for your employees and fewer negative ones, is like what I'm getting at. And technology and intention can help that.
So this is a big challenge that I see with especially CTOs or technology leaders, is just forgetting to give recognition and forgetting to celebrate the accomplishments of the team. And so one of the things that I do is I just sort of say, let's just put agenda items all over the place. Every single ceremony, a stand up, a retro, an all hands, you name it, right? And just put something in there that's like recognition, and find something to talk about, find something to recognize, because otherwise the sprints just roll into marathons and people get they get demoralized. So I know you had mentioned that you do have these systems in place to kind of make these things automatic. So how does that work?
Yeah, there's that's such good advice that you're giving. Um, there's all kinds of things. Within like with what we do, the milestones and the birthdays that can easily slip by if you're not paying attention. When managers get prompts, and we even invite them to write some of those thank yous ahead of time, just like a really good manager with a stack of thank you cards in their office will preemptively prepare to have something ready to say thanks because they know something's coming up that's meaningful and they want to make sure that they're there for it when the moment happens. So we let them write those thank yous ahead of time and get ready, and then we deliver them on time for them. Um, I love that you talked about at the end of ceremonies. That's such an important part of a meaningful appreciation, is that it's timely, that it hits at just the right moment. And so when a manager and their employee finishes a one-on-one inside of Motivosity, and the screen flips over from their agenda to a completion moment, it presents them with an opportunity to say thank you to the person they just met with. Type a little appreciation. Hey, thanks for the great meeting. I loved your candid thoughts about what we can do with the load balancer. As corny as that is, right? Like, that was such an interesting discussion. Thank you for taking the time with me today, and send off an appreciation at the end of the meeting. So it's just like all those little interactions they build up. It's like they're just good deposits of goodwill that end up creating such a vibrant and positive culture over time.
And then you had mentioned peer-to-peer recognition as well. What does that look like?
Yeah, and done in like it's what we specialize in. But it, it's there's so many elements to it. Like I'm just trying to figure out the right one to pick out, right? Um, one of the things that we do, and this is a really important part of the whole concept of what makes peer-to-peer recognition work, is we give everybody a few dollars a month to say thank you with. It's not a lot of money, but what we've discovered in the research on this is that with human behavior, when you add a financial component to an appreciation, it makes it psychologically so much more powerful and more sticky. And it's not even the amount that really does it. It's the nothing versus something has the most powerful effect. And so with $5, you can say thank you to 5 people every month, and you can add $1 each time. And when you do that, when it's timely, meaningful, and it has a financial component to it, the dopamine release that comes off of something like that is way more powerful. And and like measurably, it will take participation in an appreciation program from 20% to 80%. I'm not kidding. It's like 3x when there's a financial component added to it in terms of the participation percentage. And so yeah, so we give everybody money to spend, and we nudge them. We little mobile nudges, the stuff inside the product, little reminders. The money is use it or lose it. So if you don't give out your $5 by the end, then you lose it. Um, and then as people they appreciate each other more and more, their balance starts to grow, and they can use that money for literally anything. They can there's a Visa card it's not a prepaid card, it's like a bank card that has their balance on it, and so they can go out with their friends for a drink, or take their coworkers to lunch, or they can buy their kids a gift at Christmas, or put gas in their tank. And the money that they're spending is money that they received from their peers because their peers appreciated what they were doing for them at work. It's like carrying your company's gratitude for you in your pocket.
And probably a little more useful than a big glass paperweight.
Absolutely. A set of frying pans or a leaf blower at your 3-year anniversary, right? And no joke, those are both examples of rewards that our customers have reported they got before they switched over to Motivosity. So, yeah, those kinds of things, we call that the gratitude loop. You you have a moment, you work on a project, you want to express appreciation, you say thank you to someone, it's timely, there's a financial part of it. That person feels that, they feel appreciated, and it motivates them to go say thank you to someone else. And so it raises the level of consciousness. So everybody is aware of the importance of gratitude and the importance of saying thank you to each other for the good things that they do. That becomes self-reinforcing, and then the entire organization is uplifted as a result of it.
Oh, that's incredible. And so you're saying you do a lot of data mining here. I know you said it might be hard to kind of calculate the ROI, but you have to be seeing some big indicators here that this is working.
Yeah, we see the employee net promoter scores go up, and I don't even have the latest stat, but it's like 50 to 60% over the first year that a company rolls this out on average with our benchmark for our customers that come on board. We see the intent to stay change. It goes up by double digits. It's crazy what it can do. And you would think, wow, this is the most valuable. This is the eureka moment, right? But amazingly, the 95% of companies in the US aren't doing anything with peer-to-peer appreciation yet. They still are kind of in a top-down, I just want my managers to be able to give rewards, and I want, maybe I want them to be able to buy something on Amazon when they hit their year mark or whatever. And they're missing it because we've lost those structural supports for culture in the pandemic, and people are aware of it, leaders know, but most of the industry is still not, they haven't realized that there is a solution to this out there. And that's exciting for us, right? It means there's huge opportunity to grow and do a lot in the future. That market is enormous, but it also means that the scale of the problem is still really big. Most employees are not motivated at work. The needle hasn't moved a lot on that. It's actually down, right? That's why we're in the Great Resignation. And so we're excited that we have such fertile ground and like such a huge opportunity to do some good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, another study that I found around COVID, kind of the earlier stages of COVID, was that, especially in the tech industry, attrition shot up to something around 25% a year, up from, I think, about 15% a year. Rough numbers. But specifically in the tech industry, the retention was just terrible. And, a lot of people were saying that was already kind of moving in this direction, and then COVID just accelerated it. And then what that means as well is that, obviously there are market corrections when people join new companies, and that's been driving the cost of engineering through the roof as well. So I don't know what kind of data scientists you have on your team, but I think you can come to some pretty big numbers.
Yeah, for sure. We have a member of our product team is a PhD in psychology. So that probably doesn't surprise you because we spend so much time looking at the research, trying to figure out what it is that makes people tick and how we can leverage that to get these great outcomes for them at work. But I'm not at all surprised to hear those rates go up for lots of reasons. That the beginning of the pandemic was super unpredictable. Nobody knew what to expect, but we did know that the economy was going to shift virtual. Like nobody was surprised when Amazon's stock price went to the moon as soon as everybody had to buy stuff online suddenly because like the Walmart was closed. Um, and yeah, I think it's still shaking out that way, like a redefined social contract between employer and employee. And suddenly, the free laundromat and the nap pods were not very helpful because they were behind a locked door downtown. So yeah, people needed to figure out, well, what do I really want out of work? What do I need my work to be for me? And yeah, we're still figuring it out a couple of years on for sure.
Yeah. So what are some of the big growth challenges you guys are facing these days?
I think the biggest challenge I alluded to it a little bit with ROI is, a common way to think about products and the problems they solve, or a way I like to think about it is the how painful is the problem, and how aware is the customer of the seriousness of their problem. Some problems are like shark bite problems. Like if you don't have payroll software that works, everybody knows that missed payroll is like getting bit by a shark. It's it's life threatening. Other problems that some companies, and technology companies try to solve are like dog bite problems. Like a lot of developer software stuff. Like if your IDE for your developers is super slow, or your instrumentation for your production environment is bad, and so you've got instability in production, like that's a pretty serious problem. Getting bit by a dog is a bad thing for your business, but it's not usually fatal. And then you have mosquito bite problems, and there are tons of companies out there making products that you have to really work to convince somebody that they should try to use it because they've got a pretty decent solution already, and the problem that you're solving is really not that critical anyway. And we could probably like juicero, right? But that's a mosquito bite problem. A better juicer for your celery kale exercise drink. That's a mosquito bite problem. So you were saying, yeah, Motivosity. Where would you put us as in that scheme there?
Yeah, no, I would say you guys seem like a snake bite problem where it may not hurt so much in the moment, but it'll kill you.
Yeah, that's a good example. I love that. Maybe I need to add snake to the list of animals. It's true though that when you're selling, or when you're providing a service like this, it takes a thoughtful and forward-looking leader to see that. When you're in the moment, like so many leaders are, they're on fire all the time. Their hair's on fire. They got a million things going on, and they're only giving attention to the short term, like the shark bite, right? Is what they have time and money for. And so something that is as insidious as declining culture takes a really astute and thoughtful leader and somebody who is playing the long game. There are plenty of companies out there where by philosophy they hire and they use up their people, and they burn them out and let them go. And so for us, that is the challenge. It's finding companies that are led by people who are in it for the long term, who make investing in their culture the core part of what they do. They don't save the report from the head of people ops for the last 10 minutes of the board meeting if there's time and nobody's got an early flight. Like they make people ops a core part of what makes them unique, and they value like they take pride in it. And like, we are great when it comes to people and culture. Those companies, it's like a no-brainer. Like they're the ones that go with us, that on this journey that we're able to support. And then we're working as best we can, in the marketing that we do to try to find those people.
Yeah, yeah. Find them and create that awareness. I mean, it anyone who's going to be in business, anyone who's building a startup, it is a long game, whether you like it or not. And or unless you fail, and then it's a pretty short game, right? But if you're successful, it's a long game. And so investing your people is the number one way to do it. We think of the same thing when it comes to customers, right? It's all about churn and retention. It's much easier to keep an existing customer who's happy than to burn and attract a new one. The same thing is for your people. In fact, even more so, because they bring all of that tribal knowledge and relationships and so on.
Yeah. I've never seen a startup that's, graduated from the early stages where they're, between 10 and 25 million in ARR, where they don't have several engineers, and maybe including the technical founder, who are the longest tenured employees. Because when you've got those key people, and if they churn out early on, it's like a death sentence. Like, you cannot get a startup past 10 million without a few of your key people, not just engineers, but yeah, key people from early on that believed, bought in, and were there and did the work, were the soldiers that made it happen.
Yeah, yeah, and we're committed to the cause. Um, yeah, well, so I'm interested. You've gone through this in the past too, right? So with Workfront, so you've been with companies that have gone through all those stages of scaling up, right? In general, in your
Yeah, yeah. Workfront was, yeah, big by the end. I think it was. I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion was the pickup. It was public, so that Adobe bought them for. So pretty sizable company, and definitely enterprise scale by the time they finally went, and it was super like a completely different business, right? From at every stage, it was just like totally different, small, mid-size, and then as they got larger.
So you're you're moving back into the growth stage now. Are there any lessons learned or experiences from Workfront that you're bringing here and saying, I'm not going to do that again, or that was the thing that really was the key to our success?
Absolutely, I think it's one of our biggest advantages. When we were doing it at Workfront, none of us really knew what we were doing, and there were some good books out there, but we were only 8 or 9 years on, and with SaaS even being a thing in the world that people knew about. Like Salesforce was kind of a pioneer in the early 2000s, and there we were in 2010, 2011, trying to figure this stuff out. There's so much more knowledge out there, not just like our own accumulated experience, but just knowledge of the business model and how it works in the industry and how to scale. And there was no Spotify manifesto. There was no Netflix culture slide deck back then that everybody looked at. There was no Bible, but we muddled along as best we could and tried to adapt and adopt things that were common practices early on, and we really latched onto agile development practices and continuous delivery. I think the book Continuous Delivery was published in 2010. Jez Humble put that one out, and so we kind of tried that stuff, and then we learned what was working and what wasn't working, and where we should have made choices way earlier. That was usually what it was, right? Like we'd be several years on, and we could go, oh man, if we had just made this architectural choice back in 2008, we would have saved ourselves millions of dollars. And so with Motivosity, it's that way with our engineering, it's that way with our product approach, it's that way with our approach to culture and how we hire. We're looking back and saying, what are the things that we eventually figured out, but it was probably too late, that we can now, because we've got this early company, we can do these things now. And like we have a much stronger foundation now. Like Motivosity is set up so much better to go forward successfully, as a result. Yeah.
Nice. Well, what are some things, if you could give advice to your former self, right? What are some of these lessons learned that are helping you be better set up now?
Yeah. Okay. So like from a product, well, maybe I'll give you one of each. Like let's talk about engineering, product, and people. Um, so like definitely like the early stages of a startup with engineering are marked by like just I got to do enough to like keep the lights on and make a sale, and I know I'm gonna accumulate some technical debt. There's no way around it because I just don't have the people to do everything that I need to do. And um, so things like being really careful about getting too clever, like really leveraging standards, really leveraging existing technologies, standing on the shoulders of those that are around you as much as you possibly can is super important, and not thinking that your own engineering, you're so smart and clever that you can build some version of something that's maybe exists out in the industry somewhere.
That's a really great point, and one that, yeah, is a big problem with very, very smart engineering leaders. Um, the way I talk about it is there's the domain of known problems and the domain of unknown problems, and you need to focus your efforts on the unknown problems and assume that 95% of everything somebody has solved before. So go get something off the shelf, maybe tweak it and tailor it a bit, but invest as much of your energy as possible into, what is it that is your secret sauce. Um, there was a there's a Carl Sagan quote that I've used with clients in the past. He said, "If you want to bake an apple pie from scratch, you first have to invent the universe." Well, the universe already exists. Just bake the damn pie.
Right. That's perfect. That's exactly what it's like. That is so what it's like. So we have a very vanilla, you'd be like hopefully you'd be happy to see it, but our infrastructure is as simple as I could make it. It's, we cloud everything, cloud native, continuous delivery, lots of automation, lots of instrumentation, and we don't fall in love with anything that we do on the engineering side. We're not precious about it. We use what works, and we do things for scale, and we do things for simplicity, and that lets us hire easily because everybody that is out in the industry has some familiarity with standard tools, and it lets us scale in a way that makes sense because we aren't writing ourselves into a box canyon with some exotic bit of code that is a already solved problem. So that's on the engineering side. The product side, it's kind of twofold, two real big lessons that I would encourage any product leader to be conscientious about. One is kind of like the engineering one, which is if you're trying to solve a problem, like or your technology needs to provide a product solution that is broadly similar to some things that exist out there already, don't fall into the trap of thinking that you can out design the people that have done this, the people that have already done this. So a good example is, let's say your product has a social feed. Lots of products have a social feed. Do you really think that your designer chops or your product management chops are better than every product manager at Facebook who has thought about a social feed over the last decade?
And who have tested ad infinitum every possible combination. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not talking about running afoul of anybody's patents here. I'm just saying some of these problems have been thought through by product leaders ad infinitum, and you need to be really careful about thinking you can invent a better version of it. Would be like it was the 1980s and you needed to create an input device that moved a cursor on the screen, and you're like, I can do better than the mouse. You really need to be smart about that part of it. So follow some trends. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, do that as a product leader. It will save you time.
So as a product researcher myself, we found that if you even try to do that, it'll make people very upset because they are so trained to those interfaces. And if you try to make something different or better, it'll create backlash, right? So they want you to borrow the same conventions because it needs to fit seamlessly and naturally into the way that they think. Most of it isn't conscious. If they think, okay, I'm going to type a thing here and I'm going to hit that send button, and that send button isn't where it's supposed to be, that's going to create that cognitive load. So absolutely, borrow and steal from those that do it better and focus on the thing that you do the best.
Right. And on that was the second part, focusing on the thing that you do best. Well, how do we define it? What is it that we do best? There's this Venn diagram of this is the company that we want to build and the mission that we have and what we think we represent. And then the other part of it is this is what all of our customers do with the stuff that we build. And hopefully those two overlap a lot. But often, especially early stage startups, they don't overlap much. Like you've got this big grand vision of what you think you're going to be as a company, and then you've got your customers, and they're telling you usually a version of the story that's different. And so as a product leader, back to like that this is an art, there's no perfect way to do this, but honor the vision of your company, be in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, and be super receptive to what your customers are showing you. I'm using the word show instead of tell on purpose. Be in love with what your customers are showing you your product does for them. Because if they're paying you money, then you must be doing something valuable for them. Something you're making them a better version of themselves somehow if they're giving you their time and their money. But they might be making themselves being a better version of themselves with your product in a way that wasn't quite what you expected, and that's okay. So being a great product leader early on is having the mental flexibility to honor your own vision for what it should be and really see what your customers are showing you. Culturally is the last one with people. I've hired all sorts of different engineers and product people over the years. I'm sure you probably have too. People come to work for lots of different reasons. They're motivated by lots of different things. I love that most engineers are not solely motivated by money. They're not as coin operated. I love that some of them, they just love puzzles. They love solving hard problems. They love being surrounded by other smart people and having interesting people to have debates with. People come to work for lots of reasons, but I think early stage engineers are a special breed. That you've got to find people in every function of your business that has a customer orientation. That isn't necessary later on. Later on, you're going to have specialists that DBA who really is happy to just add more indexes and just do what DBAs do all day long. But early on, they all have to have a customer orientation, and it shows up in the kind of work that they've done in their work history, usually in the way that they talk about their craft and how they think about their craft, and when they talk about what makes them excited to come to work every day. And I've had to pass on lots of really smart engineers that were probably even more qualified as engineers early stage, because I knew that for them, those sacrifices that they would have to make in the purity of their engineering work or in their product work would be really hard for them at early stage, where the customer orientation is the most important thing.
Do you have any personal leadership principles that are really top of mind or really important for you?
Honoring people's humanity is the number one thing, really, I guess, is a way of putting it. That's sort of a catch-all. But I think it's really, really critical as a leader to appreciate that everybody's different. Everybody is going to come with their mix of things that they're great at, things that they struggle with, things that they're confident about, and then things that they're insecure about. And sometimes that's professional stuff, but sometimes it's personal stuff too. Everybody has their own past, their own formed relationships, experiences with leaders, with former bosses, parents, partners. And the art, I think, of being a good leader is crafting a vision that is a big enough tent that everybody that you're going to bring into your company can kind of get behind, that that you're going to be able to attract people with that vision because it's broad enough. But then not painting everybody with the same paintbrush, going, well, just because you're all in the tent with me doesn't mean we're all the same. We all are going to come at this from different places. And so my job as a leader is to help each person individually in that one-on-one time and in every interaction, both like to take what makes them unique and great, safeguarding against where they struggle, and tie what they're doing to the vision that we all have, our shared purpose. And if I'm effective at doing that, then what we're going to have is a really vibrant and diverse group of employees all pulling in the same direction to the goal that we have. And each person's going to feel like they have a reason to be there that's unique and personal for them. So that is how I try to approach leadership.
I love it. Yeah, so I'm a huge evangelist of human-centered design in all facets, and the core principle there is empathy. And so you can have this vision, but if you can empathize with your team, you can bring in all those different diverse voices and perspectives, and come up with something gestalt, something that's better than the sum of its parts. So I have this leadership model that I created that I use I call it the leadership stack. And I try to create what I call the full stack leaders, right? Like full stack developers. So kind of at the bottom or the essential layers, you've got your operations and your strategy, right? So that's the running the business and planning for the future kind of thing. Then you have your visionary, right? And so the ability to see the future. And most leaders are pretty good at two or three of those things. And then the top two layers are the things that I find that I believe are most important for an evolved leader. One is storytelling, which is how do we connect the dots between where we are today and what that vision of the future is. And then the last one is coaching, which is how do we actually turn it around and understand what our people care about and help them realize their own potential through the vehicle of our mission, of our business. That's my personal belief. That's how I got here. That's why I'm an executive coach. I came up through those ranks. I was really great at strategy, not so great at vision, got really great at storytelling, and discovered coaching as this way of just getting incredible performance out of people. So from a leadership perspective, how do you think about coaching, or how do you leverage coaching in leading your teams?
What a great model. I love that. It sounds like we're really aligned in terms of where we see the power of good leaders. And I think coaching is an essential part of that alignment between what is a person and their unique makeup, and what's the big picture, what are we ultimately trying to accomplish. Those interactions are coaching interactions, and sometimes they're formal. I am super, like, I'm totally negative on performance reviews and annual reviews and all that nonsense. It's a demotivator for everybody. I don't know anybody that likes them. But even, some structured coaching can be really good when it's regular and consistent and has some formality to it. You're saying, well, what are we trying to help you be better at? I really believe in strengths-based coaching, uh, and using something like StrengthsFinder to figure those out, and then to build those. Like, let's take the things that they're great at and make them even better at it, rather than always just trying to shore up what they're not as good at and make everybody the same. Um, but I think the best coaches are the ones that are they're doing it all the time. Sometimes people don't even know they're being coached a little bit, because their interactions with the leader leave them with things to think about, things to go tweak and make better. They because their interaction with the leader reorients them to what's most important. It shines light on, oh, here's some things I can be doing. Like, he gave me some ideas or some tips, some things that I could go do that would help me be more effective or be better. So they leave those interactions feeling enriched each time, whether it's coaching officially in the moment or just the time that they spend with their leader.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you said it. Those questions, those questions that you provide for those one-on-ones, those are coaching questions right there. And the one-on-one really is a coaching conversation, right, between managers and people on their team. So I love the fact that you've built this platform that inspires and engages people in coaching conversations and developing greater leaders like that.
Yeah, yeah, we're super aligned. We're super aligned. Life is too short. Life is too short to have a crappy day at the office. Um, we, we've heard it's become a platitude that nobody ever said they wish they'd spent more time at the office, on their deathbed. We've all heard that one, but it's in favor of, I wish I'd spent more time on my relationships. Well, it is possible to have relationships with the people that you work with that are that meaningful. I mean, we're spending a huge portion of our lives on these projects. Like, we're doing this stuff with, like, hopefully not just for a paycheck, but so many are, right? So many, they're at their job because they've just got to make rent. So we're working on bridging that gap. It's not going to be perfect for everybody. Not everybody's going to get to have a job that just fills them up inside and makes them self-actualized. But almost everybody's going to get to have a job where they're going to get to be around people. And from the time we crawled out of the jungle, we have been social creatures who spend our time around each other working on projects together. We're going to go get some berries, slay a saber-toothed tiger, or finish the quarterly numbers for the board. But we're doing stuff together, right? And enriching those interactions, what's most important.
My mind immediately went to some Far Side strip where there's a caveman in the conference room with the graphs on the whiteboard. Yeah. Yeah, we're still the same people.
It's the same deal. It's the same deal. Maybe those cave paintings were just product discovery sessions, and they were trying to figure out how to kill the animals in their immediate environment. So they were drawing pictures of animals and pointing with spears and trying to figure it out, right? It was just a little bit of product research there.
You want to talk about raising the stakes on product design? If that spear breaks, you don't get another shot.
That's a shark bite problem.
Um, well, Jesse, it really has been a pleasure. Like you said, I feel really, really well aligned with you. I'm really happy that you're doing what you're doing and fighting the good fight to help people be happier at work. Is there anything else before we go that any messages you want to send out to our audience?
There is. It's the same one I share at the end of all of these talks. We, as technologists, are incredibly lucky to be in the industry that we're in, to get to work on the kinds of problems that we work on and do it in the way that we do it. Here in the 21st century, an individual engineer can write a line of code like somebody that no one will ever know and affect billions of people financially or personally or professionally. We've never lived in an era where that was even remotely possible until now. So that's an incredible responsibility. And I think everybody that works in this industry needs to take that as seriously as it really is. Be grateful, yes, that you have the opportunity to do it, and then think really hard about how you're using that incredible power that you have being in technology. I hope that all of us on this, podcast and wherever you are will reflect on what you do every day and whether what you're doing is creating good and adding value and helping people be happier and more successful in their lives. And that if you need to, you make the hard choice to invest your skill and expertise in your craft and technology on things that are going to make for a better, society, a better world for us to live in.
I love it. Great message. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. You're a great storyteller, and you're on a great mission. So you got my full support.
Thank you so much, Eric. Looking forward to chatting with you again sometime. Thanks for the invite.